Hello, my name's Vicky Washay and welcome to A Wealthy Life. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the 3 steps to a successful property business. I'm going to be comparing it to a Harvard model that talks about how this is very linear and how we are moving through on a journey. And I think what I've come to the conclusion as I've been speaking to you as part of this podcast is that it's not a straight line. Property investment is not a straight line. Everybody's journey is not the same as everybody else's. We already know that. But you can move backwards and forwards through these 3 steps throughout the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years as appropriate for you. And we will put in place strategic conversations every time your portfolio is coming up for remortgage so that we can go through the consolidation thinking I talk about and make sure that it is performing in the best way possible for you. So I'm sure you're going to learn a lot from this episode. It will get you thinking. If you want to book in a call to look at the performance of your portfolio, please do. Meanwhile, enjoy. So one of the key questions I'm often asked about by clients, and it comes at different times. Some people ask this question very early on. Some people come to this question much later, is what next? How do I progress this? How do I take this forward? And of course, what we're starting off with right at the very beginning is that we have looked at your strategy. We know why you want to invest in property. We know that you have the resources and you're going to use my skills, my team, my experience to leverage your journey, to make your journey easier and smoother. But you're then thinking yourself, okay, so I'm going to buy one property. How do I buy the second property or the third property? Or maybe you know that you can buy 3 properties. How do you buy 4, 5, 6? And then when you've bought 5, 6, 10, what happens next? And that's what I want to explain to you in this episode. So let's start off by thinking initially about what are the stages of business development, and then I will take you through them. So I did a little bit of research because I've got my own words, my own way of describing the journey. And those 3 words are acquisition, that's the buying phase. And we'll talk about that in more detail. And then there's the consolidation phase where you feel like you've got enough properties. And so you're then starting to review what you've got and what you want to do next. And that's very important. And then the last part for me is where you're actually developing the wealthy life. That's the bit where you've got all that you need, and now you're moving on to the stage where you can reap the benefits of all that you've been doing. But if you look at what Harvard say, and I mean, this is only one person, and just to give it some more context, there is a lecturer at Harvard Business School, and I think he's something like the director for the Forum of Growth, and the name being Derek Van Beaver, and I'll put the links to the article that I found in the show notes. And basically, he talks about the concept of the business journey. So we're going on a journey to create this business. What is the business journey? And he uses the phrase journey. I feel that it's a journey. We're on a path. Everything that we're on is a journey. And he says that it starts with the creation phase. And so the creation phase for him is that point where you are thinking about what the business is. You've got an idea. They'll use terms like the value proposition. So what's in it for you? They'll look at the resources. We've done that. The process, that's effectively me. And the profit formula, that's actually the spreadsheet that works out whether this is a good deal or not. And so he talks about there being metrics and data, and then this idea of a flexible business model. And that's what we're looking at right at the beginning. Now, I term that as the acquisition phase, and we'll, as I say, speak about that in a bit more. Then he goes on to say that after the creation phase, we're looking at, and he uses the phrase, sustaining innovation, because what you're looking at now is still working through all the ideas of why am I investing in property? What are the resources I've got? You're always looking at that. but he's now looking at the processes. So he says sustaining innovation is really about processes. So again, you're looking at the data to look at how you can improve things. Now, I would call that the consolidation phase. So that's where we're looking at the performance of the properties that you have in your portfolio, and we're starting to work out who's working best for you. Is there an opportunity to churn the portfolio, to mix it up and to move it on another step? So we're looking at improvements. And then his last step after creation and then sustaining innovation is efficiency. And he's put efficiencies at the end and talking about the profit formula. And I think really my idea of consolidation is where maybe all of these have come a bit sooner for me. Creation is also about innovation and about the processes. I would put them up front. And he's talking about the profit formula, and that's where I would reevaluate that at the consolidation phase. But one of the big things that he says here is that inefficiency, that's the point where your investors are demanding a return on capital. And I like that idea because you're the investor in your property business and you are going to be returning or demanding a return of your capital. You'll be getting it all the way through, but this is where you want to see the output, this final bit where you're developing the wealthy life. You want this portfolio to be generating the income so that you can live the life that you want to live. And I found that really interesting that we can go through, I suppose, my experience and using my words and then compare it with actually Harvard Business School, which is supposed to be renowned for business development and business creation and everything else, to actually look at how there are similarities here. And the reason I've done it this way around is that my experience at university was the university was very much about the theory, and it didn't always relate to the practical experience of being out there. And so I suppose what's intrigued me this time is that the practical experience actually has mapped back out on to the theory. And so one of the things that Mr. Derek Beaver says is that when they look at why large companies stall in their growth, and I'm going to be having this conversation with Susie in a few weeks' time, Susie Cole, you'll be able to pick that up in the show notes later, is that they have a real problem in shifting from the creation phase to the sustaining phase. So that bit for me is they have a real trouble in moving from constantly buying. They stay in the constantly buying mode, and they're not looking at, I suppose, improving the performance of what they've got. And he says that in that movement from sustaining a business to the next phase of efficiency, that's where most businesses really fail. So if they manage to move from, I'm going to create, and now I can sustain the business, they then don't move from sustaining to be efficient. And it's actually this point of constantly moving through the journey. You can do it property, you can shift a property through at a time, or you can take the whole portfolio through. And maybe you need to be doing a bit of both. But without that, you're not going to be successful. So let's just come back to my words and explain them in a bit more detail. And be clear that this is just a conversation to trigger your thinking, to help you understand things better. There is no one size fits all. You'll know that from all of the other podcasts that I've shared with you. There is no one strategy that is the same for everybody. There is no one technique that is the same for everybody. But I really do feel, having worked with hundreds of clients helping them build property portfolios, that these three words do work for me. Maybe I should put efficiency or payout at the other end. I don't know. But let's just talk about, first off, the acquisition phase. So this is very much right at the beginning. It is where you are acquiring properties. Now, you'll have an overarching strategy. You'll be aware of your resources. There'll be a plan in place. and we will have picked at this moment the most appropriate investment technique for you. The technique we choose, typically buy to let, but the technique that we choose is suited to your personal circumstances and no one size fits all. Now, what do I mean about that? Because even within buy to let, there is a difference. So it could be that what we're doing for you is buying simple 3-bed family buy to lets that you are going to hold for rental return. Now, absolutely nothing wrong with that. But it could be that you have sufficient money that what we're going to do is buy your first 1, 2, maybe even 3 properties with cash, do them up, and then remortgage and pull the money back out. Now, why would we do it that way round? Because if we bought them on a mortgage, let's say, keep the maths nice, £100,000, and then we spent the money to do the property up, let's say £30,000, you'll have spent, in simple terms, the deposit of £25,000, never mind all the fees that go into it, the deposit of £25,000 plus the 30,000 of the refurb budget. So you'll have spent out of your cash plus fees 55,000. If we were able to do the property up, get it valued at 130,000, and therefore be able to take a deposit back out of that. So you've bought it, you have actually paid out, you've bought it outright for cash, you have actually paid out that £30,000 in cash. And now we've got a property worth 130. We're not going to try and look for anything that is more complicated than that. And then we're going to remortgage that property for 130,000. You'll pull out £32,500. So in a sense, you're getting out all of the refurb money that you've put in. So the first way to buy it might have been to buy it with a mortgage and then pay your 30,000 for the refurb budget. So that's cost you 55. This way round, it's cost you all of that amount of money, yes, but you've pulled £32,000 back out. So it's like you've only left the deposit in there. You've left a lot less money in the deal. And so that is a better way to be going forward. And so for some clients, we might buy the first property, do it up, remortgage it, buy the second property, do it up, remortgage it, or maybe they can buy 2 or 3 and then we remortgage them after that. The timing is also very personal to you. So that could be a variation on the buy to let investment technique, if you like, a sub strategy of that technique of how we're going to operate it. I also have clients who particularly like flats. Now, you know that I'm not a fan of a flat, but there is a difference to a flat in a block where there might be 20, 30, even 100 or more properties in there. You're just one of many. You have no control. You have no relationship with the freeholder. They're just some strange company that hold the freehold. You've got no real relationship with the management company except they send you invoices on a regular basis. It's a completely different proposition if we've taken a large 3-bed, typically Victorian, sometimes purpose built, and built either 2, 3, 4, or 5 sub flats within one structure, and you can buy the whole lot. So you are buying the freehold block with all the subcomponents in there. That's a completely different proposition. That takes a lot more money. You're now talking about easily £300 purchase prices instead of looking at a straightforward £100,000 purchase price on a single house. For 3 times the amount of money, you can easily be getting 3 flats or 4 flats or possibly even 5 flats. An example, one client bought a Victorian split into 3 flats, 2 1-beds and a 2-bed, and the gross rent from all 3 of those sub properties was £2,000. That was more money and saved more money in terms of fees and everything else than if we had gone out and bought 2 smaller buy-to-let properties for somewhere in the region of, 120 to £130,000. It doesn't always work. Sometimes the little houses actually are still worth more and give more money than the larger block. But the larger block then gives you more components. So you do have a freehold, you have a number of flats, you have ways that you could split that up within the company. And so it might be slightly more advanced, but something that's appropriate for you. But the point is of acquisition is there is the general principle that we are going to be in a buying phase based on your strategy, using the most appropriate investment technique, using your resources in the best way possible. And we will do that for a number of properties. I would say that most properties these days are put on 5-year mortgages. So we don't really need to come back and even consider the consolidation phase, that sense of what can we do with your portfolio now until we reach 5 years. Now, in 5 years, one property might be due up for a mortgage, and then it might be 6 years until the second property, because you might have been buying them one a year, or you might have bought 3, 4, or 5 in the first 2 years. So around about year 5, 6, the entire portfolio is coming up for remortgage. Now, 6 months before that first property in your portfolio is due for its first remortgage, we really want to be evaluating the properties. Now, don't get me wrong, you should have been evaluating the properties on an annual basis, probably also a quarterly basis. And that's something that we would have been talking about, because we don't want to get 5 years down the line and then work out that one of the houses has been empty. We don't want to get 5 years down the line and work out that you haven't put the rent up. So there are things that are going to be going on in the background, the processes that will already be there, annual rent increases, 6 monthly reviews to make sure that the property is being well maintained. There'll be bits of maintenance. You might have a tenant leave. You might then refurbish a property. If you've picked up one of the properties that I do that are landlord to landlord, we might not have done the full refurb on day one. And then if your tenants move out, we might be doing that at year 3, year 4. So again, so many variations in this. But basically, we're getting to year 5, your first property is coming up for remortgage. And 6 months before that, one of the first things we're going to do is grab a mortgage offer that is out there so that we secure the rate at the time. And then depending on what's going on, we will revise that rate if something happens in the market. If not, at 3 months, we will then revise it again at 5.5 months, just to make sure that you're getting the best mortgage rate. So that's putting on, the belt, if you like. That's securing that property with a good mortgage offer. But we've not taken out the mortgage offer. We have not gone all the way forward and remortgaged, and therefore put ourselves back in another 3 or 5 year mortgage loop. What we're also going to do is review performance, and we're going to consider values. Has this property increased in value? And while we're looking at number 1 property, we'll also take a quick look at properties 2, 3, 4, 5 to see what's coming down the line. Then what we'll do is we will look at the properties in terms of their rental performance. So while the rents will have been going up every year, how is the current rent compared with market rent? Because one of the issues can be is that while you're still putting the rents up, because you want to increase the rents, cost of living increases, etc., it also helps your tenant cope with small changes on an annual basis, rather than at the end of 3 years you whacking it up a big amount. They can't absorb that amount into their budget and then they have to leave. You don't want to cause your tenants, your clients, to have to leave their homes. So by doing smaller incremental changes, it's easier for them to budget for it. But even though you've been doing that, you might find that in your area, rents have increased astronomically and you're now out of line. And so there is a strategic view to be taken there. Are you happy with the tenant you've got? Keep the tenant you've got. Is this an opportunity to do a piece of work for the tenant? For example, one of my clients, they've taken on a property that's got a tenant in place, and we've talked about putting in a new kitchen in due course. We want the tenant in the early stages of the tenancy to prove that they can pay the rent on time, that they can keep the house nice, that they can take care of the property because they do have 2 dogs and 3 children, because we're not going to bother to put in a brand new kitchen if they're going to just trash it. So we want to make sure how they perform. Now, it just so happens that because we bought this property with a tenant in place, we know how the tenant is behaving. We know that they pay their rent on time. We know that they can keep the property, even though they've got 3 children and 2 dogs. So that's not actually an issue, but you would want to check that. And so what can happen is about year 3, when you go, oh, hang on a second, the rents, even though they're going up a little bit, the market rent is leaping away. That's the point at which you can have a conversation and start saying, well, look, if we give you a brand new kitchen, we are going to want to increase the rent by another 100 instead of £50 a month. We're going to increase it by 100 a month. Does that work for you? And what you'll find is that tenants who appreciate what you're doing for them, want the new kitchen, and appreciate the new kitchen will be prepared to pay, in a sense, £50 a month in order to have the kitchen that you're going to sort of like co-design with them. Yes, it'll still be a sensible kitchen, but like, for example, with this family, they have the dogs, they want to have 2 under counter areas. So we're going to look at how we redesign the kitchen so that there are 2 under counter areas for the dog cages and the dog beds to go. So you can start to look at this sort of stuff at consolidation. Market rent, market value. Then you start to look at overall the property. And let's take an example where you've got 5 properties. One of them has actually increased dramatically in market value. Let's say it's gone up by 30 or 40,000 pounds in your area for some reason. You bought really well, the market's gone crazy. And we're talking about going up from 100 to 140. And I have had that in one of the areas that I bought for my clients. You've come out, or you're about to come out of your tied period with your mortgage. What you need to think about now is, what's the best use of this property? Do you refurb it, put it out on the market and sell it? Okay, so you might make 40,000 less your refurb budget, which you can offset against capital gains. But then you don't have that property and you don't have that income, but you do have a lump of cash. So now you're going to think about, what do I do with that cash? Do I reinvest it? And if I reinvest it and all the property values in the area have gone up, is that a good use of my money? Because I've just sold one property that's gone up from 100 to 140, and now I can only buy another property at 130. Was that really the best use of my money? But you go through that thinking process. A lot of the time, what you might find in the consolidation phase is that you're going, no, I don't want to sell them. No, I don't want to sell it. No, I don't want to sell it. No, I don't want to sell it. And that's perfectly fine. But you're practicing at year 5. When we get to year 10, when you've done this all over again, it might be a different answer, because year 10, you're going to be 10 years older. Your personal circumstances will be completely different. But we go through the consolidation phase at around year 5 because it is good practice for you to go through that thinking process to make sure that all the processes are in place to increase the rent on an annual basis, to make sure that the rent ties with market rent, to monitor the value of the property, to check it out and check its performance in the area. The other thing that you could do, and you might find, and certainly I did when I was very, very new to this, so I don't do this for my clients, but in my very early days, was some of the properties I bought in areas that after a while I thought, this area hasn't fulfilled its promise. You'll have heard the stories of me investing in Liverpool. When I first went up there in about 2008, there was all the talk about rebuilding the Liverpool football stadium. Now you're going, what's that got to do with anything? But it's a huge cultural part of Liverpool. You know, you've got the Liverpool Football Club and you've got the Everton Football Club. I mean, it is so far in their blood. They are Reds and they are Blues. That's what they are. That's what the pubs are. That's what the streets are. It's ingrained in them around the football stadiums. And there was a story of the Americans were going to buy Liverpool and they were going to move the whole stadium to another area, rebuild it, And around that area was going to be new hotels to service the people coming to watch the football. There was going to be new green space. There was going to be some new properties. And of course, it was going to lift the whole area that was sort of L4. It's a slightly poor area. When I went there in 2008, there were streets and streets and streets of properties that were tinned up, empty, boarded up. But that was all part of this whole idea of regenerating the area. I can tell you we are now, where are we, 18 years later, and all they did was, I think they rebuilt the back wall and put up a bit of a roof and made it bigger. They didn't move the stadium in the slightest. There is no hotels in that area. And the values, yes, they have gone up, but they have not gone up and fulfilled the promise that I was hoping for. So one of my properties, the very first one that I bought there, we bought it for around the 75,000 mark. It went up in value to 125. And I felt that from 75 to a 50,000 pound increase in value, it was a good time to sell and get out. Because remember, you're not just going to gain that little bit that you have increased in value, that percentage that you've increased in value. In my case, I increased in value by £50,000, but I'm also going to get the 25% deposit that was in my £75,000 mortgage. So you do get a little bit extra back. I tend to sort of think on that when it's the smaller deals, that's the 10 grand that pays your capital gains, it pays your solicitor fees, that type of stuff. So you sort of almost lose your deposit, but you got the gain. So again, you're going through the consolidation phase early on at about year 5. Quite probably nothing will change. And having gone through the consolidation thinking, let's put it that way round, you carry on with acquisition. You keep going. Eventually, you're going to reach a stage where you have either got enough properties or you are at maybe the 10 or 15 year point. And I'm only saying 10s and 15s because at the moment, most mortgages are going out as 5-year deals. So you're going to get to say a 10 or a 15. And then what we're going to look at is what Derek Beaver would talk about as efficiency, the way that you can start getting money out of the portfolio, and what I would refer to as the development stage. This is the point at which your wealthy life really comes to fruition. Now, that doesn't mean to say that you won't have had a wealthy life for the last 5, 10, 15 years. You will, because it's a shift in mindset. It's also, you've got the income coming from these properties, but again, all circumstances are different. Quite probably you haven't been taking money out of your property portfolio, because part of the acquisition phase means that you'll be putting the property in, you'll leave the rent there, it accumulates, you add some more money to it, you buy another property, and so on and so forth. But now what you can be talking about is, do I start paying down the mortgages? And that's sort of like that's really the gap between consolidation and development, maybe. Do I start paying down the mortgages? Do I sell off a mortgage? Now, maybe we're at year 10 or 15 and you've got 10 plus properties in your portfolio. And you say, do you know what? Now I'm doing that 10-year or 15-year consolidation thinking. I am going to sell one of these. In the old days, now this was only a couple of months ago or last year, I would have said to you that you want to be selling one property every couple of years so that you can maximize the benefit of the capital gains tax allowance that you get. We forget that now. Now, the only reason you would sell a property, is if it's not performing, or if the money that you could take out of this property would create a better, equal or better return if employed in some other way. When you get to 15 years, maybe the better way that that piece of money could be performing for you might be to sell a property and clear off the last piece of your residential mortgage. And then all of a sudden you've saved yourself £1,000 or £2,000 a year with the other 9 properties that are sitting in your portfolio, no huge overheads. Your monthly outgoings are dramatically reduced. The portfolio now not only covers your basic costs enough, but actually provides more than enough or much more than enough. And so you fully are in that, I can retire now if I want to. So it's about really understanding how your thinking changes. Acquisition eventually evolves into consolidation, which might go back into acquisition or could go into a bit of selling or paying down, and then might come back again to acquisition. So I think probably the bit where I differ from Derek Beaver of Harvard is that the journey is a linear journey. So think about holiday. Sometimes you go back to the same place 2 or 3 times because you loved it. So you might go back to acquisition 2 or 3 times. But after you've been there for a number of years, you might say to yourself, do you know what? I'd like to go somewhere else. And that could be where we move through the consolidation phase and we're talking about development. You could pay down, you could sell, or maybe you decide you want to set up a property business on the side. You might have done that even sooner than this. You might decide that you want to source for other people like I do. So my evolution went from acquisition into, I suppose, a bit of business development in that I started sourcing for other people, then carried on with acquisition, then went into consolidation, then went back into acquisition, then went into more business development, and I move up and down through these. So maybe rather than this straight line, it's actually like any journey that you do. You stop off on the way. Maybe you go back home because you forgot something. Maybe you head out and you think that you're going to drive all the way to South Africa, and then you get as far as the coast and you've changed your mind. So you might pull back, you reshape. It doesn't matter. As long as what you've got to start off with is this overarching strategy of why you are investing in property and understanding that there are phases to this and you're going to work your way through. So think for this, you might get to a stage where you are already with a portfolio, it's solid, it's dependable, and now we're going to think about some advanced techniques. Because once you've got enough cash flow, you can start to rethink how you're going to employ that money. And what you might do is buy some bigger properties. You might start off with the 3-bed houses and then move into maybe buying one of those lumps. Maybe you'll decide to go into HMOs with a lot of conversations up front. Maybe you'll pull the money out. Maybe you'll start a sourcing business. Who knows what you'll do? But what I want to do is to train you how to develop and run your own property business, even though the property has been sourced through me, so that it is easy to manage, so that it is maximizing your money's performance through leverage, and it is almost like minimizing your time through leverage and good systems and my help, so that you have all the time that you want to live the life that you want. So where we've talked about this linear movement that takes you from creating the business to sustaining it through innovations, getting better, and then moving on to the efficiencies where you can pull the money out. I'm saying that it's not just that straight line. And if you look at the show notes, you'll see the diagram. I think it's a bit more of a wiggly journey that takes you backwards and forwards. You know how I love putting things together in 3 circles and making us go round the clock. I don't know if it's not even a clock. It's very much that idea of thinking about how your holidays have evolved over the years. You've gone back to a place that you like. You've gone there a couple of times. Now you've had enough. Now you want to be more adventurous. Or maybe you've always had package holidays. And then, for example, you decide that you're going to head out on your own and be adventurous and not go with a travel company. You're going to book the flight. You're going to book the hotel. There are all sorts of analogies that we could use here. The principal thing is it's not a straight line. It's not the same for everybody. There is no right or wrong. There is just continuous improvement, which is another business term, continuous improvement, not to the point where it drives you insane, but you are running a business, so we do need to be checking on it. I hope that's made it a bit clearer for you. There is a link to Beaver's article in the show notes if you want to follow it up. And what I'm going to talk about next week is what happens if it's working and you want to change your mind. Why would you do that? If it works, why would you stop doing it? And I've got a couple of case studies there for you to talk about next week. So please make sure that you subscribe to the podcast, because that way you won't miss out on any of the episodes. And I hope that what I've done in this episode is share with you three things, the three steps to a successful property business. That somewhere at the beginning, you've got to be buying property. However else you might start, you might be doing rent to rents, you might be doing lease options, you might be doing other things. But if you don't buy and own the assets, then you don't have a long-term property business that is going to enable you to live a wealthy life. Whatever the time period is, and I've picked 5 years because of the mortgages, you need to take that consolidation, that almost forensic view of your portfolio. How is it performing? Is everything working right? How can you do things better? Yes, you'll have been doing this as you go along, but you're taking a bigger strategic view at this point, because you now have to commit to another 5-year mortgage. So are you still on the trajectory that you want to be on? And then eventually you're going to get to the stage, whenever that works for you, in 5, 10, 15 years, again, going with those mortgage terms. Now what? Now what do you want to do? Do you want to set up another business on the side? Do you want to expand your investment technique? This is your opportunity to both create efficiencies in your business, to develop the business, to ensure that you have the time and the money to live the wealthy life that you want to live. And of course, you know that I am, if you're working with me as a client, I am there with you throughout the journey. So thank you very much for listening. I'll speak to you soon. Thank you again for your time listening to this podcast. I hope it's put a lot of whoosh into your thinking about where you are in this stage of the property business development. Most of you, I think, will probably still be in acquisition. It's quite a long phase. You may have already been through a period of consolidation and come back to acquisition again. It could be that you're listening to this and you're actually getting ready for that final bit, that development, where you can see, if you like, not so much the exit strategy as in you're going to leave it, but you're going to exit from the acquisition phase for good, that you're going to then just move into the phase where you are enjoying the benefits of all of the hard work that you have put into building your property portfolio. As always, please subscribe. And if you've enjoyed this, if you've benefited from this, why not share the link with other people that you know? Maybe make a mention on social media for me. And of course, I'd love it if you leave a review. Thank you very much for listening. My name's Vicky Wishay, and I will be speaking to you again next week.